Hi, Steph.
Hiya, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Good.
For everyone that's watching or listening, I'm with Steph from Scottish Athletics today, and we are going to share some of Steph's wisdom from her work with supporting clubs to begin to use sport in a more intentional way to drive wider change. Um, and we wanted to talk about three of the big messages that Steph, I suppose, would like to share with some people that are maybe starting on this journey and aren't as far along as she is. So the very first thing that you and I have already talked about quite a lot is the amount of time it takes to actually see the outcomes from this kind of work compared with maybe how sport normally works or how people would normally be used to seeing results. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. Um, so what we're essentially looking at, or how I like to look at this is we're going through a bit of a culture change within our work with the changing lives work that we're pulling in. We're getting into that sort of, excuse me, intentionality space. And part of that is recognizing that for some of our clubs, for example, they're like 120 years old. There has been many versions of that club throughout history. If you were to go back to the start versus what it looks like now, there would be similarities for sure, but there will be differences as society and cultures change. So we're in a space just now where that's happening again. But there's maybe a wee bit more information available. So it feels like there's more intentionality and that there's a wee bit more sort of pressure might not be the right word, but it just feels like the clubs feel like they should be doing more quickly. But this sort of stuff takes so much time. Like culture change in a societal stance takes a lot of time to change too. And if you'll have people within your clubs that have been part of your clubs for 40 plus years, and if you're looking at a space to introduce new things, it'll take a variety of people a variety of time to actually potentially get on board with the new things that are happening. So I like to think about it as clubs and teams like mine and our work as planting the seed for like a generation where it will then be normal. There won't be a community impact team, for example, for athletics focusing on the three areas that we are because we've supported our system to create systems to naturally start to bring those communities into our spaces or for us to go into their spaces. So yeah, it's not something that you have a quick fix for. When it comes to people and behavior change and culture change, it needs to be sustainable over a long period of time. And like coaching an athlete from beginning to wherever they want to go to, that takes time. It's the exact same with this stuff. It's not a quick fix. It's not a get yourself to the hospital and put a tuba grip on. It's actually there's prehab and rehab and all of the bits in between that. I think a good way to look at it is it's the same for any of the changing lives works. We're going to have to intentionally go into spaces and slow down a little bit and grow with our learning, which I find really exciting. But I understand that some people like results quite fast, but this space isn't for that. This is a journey. This is about where we start and who knows where we're going and kind of where we'll end up with it. So yeah, we're sowing seeds.
Yeah, I like the way you talk about it though, because it's recognizing that that cultural change takes time, but it also requires consistent effort and
Yeah,
intentionality to show up and to keep it moving.
yeah,
Otherwise, in 10 years, you will be where you were as
yeah,
well.
exactly.
So that makes a lot of sense. So there's a big one there about appreciating the amount of time it's going to take to see the outcomes, and I suppose not to become demoralized about that and to give up
Yep,
too soon. Yeah.
that's it.
The second thing you've talked quite a lot to me about, which I know is a really critical part of what the Changing Lives programme has been about. We often hear people in the sport world saying, "That's what we do anyway." You know, that's what sport does. We know the value of sport and so on. But I know a key theme has been around doing that much more intentionally. Can you tell me a little bit, for people that maybe are less aware of that, can you tell me a little bit more about how you see that intentionality? and how that's an important message for people who might be getting going with this.
Yeah, no problem. So I think I've never worked for a governing body before. I've always been in a charity space, and one of the big learnings we've had, I used to work for a charity that this is good for the overall learning, but I used to work for a charity that is right beside the Emirates Arena. And now that I'm in an athletics role within the governing body, I can't believe that I worked for that charity for 8 years. We didn't know what was going on in that Emirates Arena. We are within touching distance of that venue, and the amount of work that our clubs and the governing body put on almost every single week in that space. If we had known about that, it would have been really nice to go into that space with our young people to introduce them to athletics, doing all that intentional work. But the problem is, we're all used to working within our own little silos. We're all talking to the same people who get it. We're talking to the people who are in athletics already or on the periphery of athletics already. But we're not in a space or in a habit yet as a wider system of actually who are we not talking to. We don't notice the people that are not around our table. We notice the people that are there and have been there for a very long time, but we are talking to the same people over and over again. So I think the intentionality behind bringing this in is like focusing on who you're not speaking to, who's missing that could either support the work that you're doing or the work that you're doing could support. I think that's a really key part to, and I think I've said this in a previous recording, but we can't be everything for everyone, and that's perfectly okay. We have capacity and limited resources within our clubs. We have a lot of passion and passionate people, but we don't always have the time, and that's totally fine. But if we can get to a space where we're looking through the lens of someone who isn't in our spaces yet, what's actually preventing them? What about our setup, our systems is preventing people from coming through that haven't had parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, etc., bringing them in, which is typical for sport. If your parent or carer does a sport, you're probably more likely to do that sport. So who's not around our table, and how can we intentionally build pathways or opportunities or relationships to bring them around our table, or for us to go around their table? Doesn't always have to be people into a club space. It can be a club into a community space or just somewhere completely different. So yes, it's looking at what resources and capacity you have, where you can move with that, what can you do with that, and how can you intentionally keep a bit of resilience, because it's going to be hard, move into spaces that you haven't been into before. Yeah.
It sounds, when you talk about it, like when you're supporting people, it's often about getting them to sort of take that step back and to say, you know, what do we have realistically in terms of resources and energy, but to get away from that busyness and also then look at what the kind of impact they might like to have, and then how they match those up in the most sort of maybe efficient way isn't the best description, but to make the best use of what they have to achieve what they want to achieve.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And the third and final thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which again I think is really worth sharing, and you talk about it really well. You've said that you can't have all the answers from the beginning to me about this. So when you're working maybe with groups of people who are being more minoritized and so on. So can you tell us a little bit about that idea that we can't have all the answers at the start?
Yeah. Definitely. So this is a bit that I really enjoy about my job. There is no answer. Every community and every person is so different. Every club and every geographical area is so different. The intentionality piece is about finding that out. We don't know the answers yet. We want to build connections and relationships and solid rapport with communities, organisations, different groups of people that haven't had the opportunity to come into our sport, and we want to find out what would work together. So we, in our work, we done a good bit of desk research beforehand just to get ourselves used to the language or used to some of the barriers and challenges that the 3 demographics that we're working with could be facing and what could be a challenge for them kind of coming into our sport. But that's been like 15% of the work that we've actually done with people. That was a more of an understanding so that when we went out, it wasn't like, tell me all of the stuff that we probably already know. We didn't want to ask people the same questions that they've been asked for years and years. So it's about understanding that it's okay to not have all the answers. We'll never have all the answers. Culture and society will continue to change, which means the answers and the solutions to the problems will continue to change. But if we start to intentionally trying to figure that out, we get ourselves into a better space and a bit of ahead of the game for when naturally society does shift. We can be more informed, we can have more people around the tables with more diverse knowledge and diverse experiences that actually lend itself to creating a wider impact, but that still has a bit of community cohesion in that sort of space. So yeah, it's about, if I could say to people to like try and calm their nerves about it, is like find the excitement in the nerves. Like it's okay to not know the answers. We're not supposed to know the answers, but what we can do as the system is create a space where we can find the answers that is utilising lived experience and diversity of thought to actually find those answers, or at least create a way to maybe find those answers. So yeah, that's it's really hard to want to solve a problem that you don't know how to solve, but we need to lean into that uncomfortable feeling in this space and recognise that it's part of the process. It might take a long time to get an answer to something, but that's okay because we've got a good enough understanding of it that we can then implement something that will actually have a positive impact, instead of thinking we know the answers, trying to implement something, spending a lot of time and resource, and it doesn't have the impact that we want it to have, and then we're all the way back at the start again. So yeah, so it's slowing down, like you said before, taking a bit of a bird's eye view to be like, okay, how can we solve this? We don't have the answers, but this is how we're going to try to get the answers. And that's when your strategy of pulling people around you and going into spaces to kind of find those people is probably the key task.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing all of that today. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure it'll be very useful to everyone. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.